is the GI Microcast, recorded on Monday, the 12th of August 2024. I'm Editor-in-Chief James Batchelor. I'm joined, as always, by Head of GamesIndustry.biz, Chris Dring. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, yeah. I'm delighted to see your face, James. And the listeners at home won't know how difficult it was doing that introduction James just did there. James and games are two words that are just too similar, and it was a bit of a stress. We got there, though. We're here. We've done the intro. And I wanted to quickly say something. Last week on the GI Microcast, we talked about the Nintendo Switch. James made a comment about how people seem to think it's coming out in March next year. And I thought, no, nobody thinks that, really. And it turns out people do think that. And I just wanted to say, I'm going to say now that console is not coming out before in this financial year. And I'm saying this for two reasons. One, when Nintendo revealed their financials, they said they were going to announce the successor to the Switch in the next financial year. They didn't say they were going to release it. In previous financial years, when they have released a new console, they normally say they're going to release a new console. They did for the NX, as it was called before it became the Switch. This time they haven't done that. They've just said they're going to announce it. So that was a big, big clue. The second one is that no developer I've spoken to expects it to be launching this in the financial year. In fact, they've been told not to expect it in the financial year. A bunch of people I spoke to hope it's out in April, May time, still early next year, not late. And I don't think any of us wants a late launch for Switch 2 because we all want a new Nintendo console. Everyone gets very excited for it. And B, we don't want that crunch of like GTA 6 and Switch and all that kind of stuff on top of each other. But I just wanted to quickly address a conversation from a previous Microcast, and then we can move on and talk about this week's news.
Absolutely, let's do that. We're going to dive in. I've got 4 short stories to do before we dive into some meaty ones. We're continuing financial season here. First one I want to start with is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers doesn't release specific figures for its games segment. It releases those under its studio segment, which encompasses TV and film as well as video games. They did confirm that games revenue has declined 41% year on year. This was cited as largely attributed to the weak performance of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and of course the comparisons with the success of Hogwarts Legacy in 2023, which launched in roughly the same window. The 6-month comparison is even poorer. For the 6 months ended June 30th, games revenue declined 66% year on year. It's not just video games, the whole studio segment. So again, that's TV, film and video games was down 4% year on year to $2.45 billion. Suicide Squad has become not a scapegoat as such, but it's very much kind of the poster child for the woes at the moment. But Chris, we were saying in a previous take that you think that's unfair because
maybe it's because I played the game and I liked it, and I like the Rocksteady people, and I think it's a bit, the reason why Warner Brothers numbers are down is they didn't launch a Hogwarts Legacy this year. They had Lego Star Wars the year before, actually. They've had these 2 years where they had a really, really big breakout hit game, and this year they haven't had one. And I don't think Suicide Squad was ever going to be that level of mega hit. Like, it's Suicide Squad. It's not even Batman, right? It's I don't think it was ever going to be that big a hit game. It obviously has disappointed, but I just feel a bit bad that every time Warner Brothers goes, our numbers are down, it's because of Suicide Squad. Really, it's because of Hogwarts. But yeah, I just feel a bit sorry for it because I don't think, I actually enjoyed the game. I've only played it a little bit, but what I played of it, I thought was good. It's the real reason they're down is because, we know why. It's because Hogwarts Legacy was massive. Like, I don't think we can really overstate how big that launch was. So, yeah, a bit hard.
There's bound to be comparisons. Like, you could go back to Bandai Namco, like the year after they released Elden Ring, they almost certainly would have had like just as steep an increase. Like, we're seeing this with, Nintendo and, the Tears of the Kingdom effect. Like, everyone's revenues are down the year after you release a massive hit in the same window. Like, it's not uncommon.
This is the games industry, isn't it? It's a cycle. We don't. We're not a toy industry. We don't launch something every Christmas and expect. Not anymore, anyway. It's we live in development cycles, and things will go up and go down. It's just how the trend is over time. That's what you need to look at.
I'm going to use my fleeting Bandai Namco reference to segue smoothly into their results. So the first quarter for their financial year, net sales are up 24.8% to $1.9 billion. Profits rose 56.3% to $233 million. A large part of that will be because of Elden Ring. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC expansion should-be sequel released on June 21st. It sold 5 million units within its first 3 days. Obviously, Bandai Namco is a wider business than that. It has other things, but kind of, Shadow of the Erdtree is kind of cited as a major success. We talked about this a little bit last week, as how well the base game of Elden Ring has done, and top of the charts in the US for the month of June in terms of US spending and unit sales. So kind of solid results there, kind of following up on what we said last week.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see if Elden Ring follows how closely it follows the pattern of games like Skyrim and The Witcher, where they sort of just constantly kept selling all the time. And these big expansions just sort of put a bit of a rocket fuel behind that. I don't know if Elden Ring is going to be quite the same. I think it perhaps be a little bit too hardcore, but it'll be interesting to see anyway. I think that's where we are with Elden Ring. Is it a game that's going to sell for years and years and years and years and years and years and years? And so far, it's been over 18 months. Am I got that right? Since maybe even longer than that. I've
more than that. It's 2.5 years. Came out 2022, didn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Love the confidence there.
What year is it?
This is the thing.
Yes, no, you're right, because I played it. I had COVID when I played it. Yes, you're right. It's been ages. It's been over 2 years. Sorry, you're right. Got it wrong. And it's still going. It's just whether or not I'll be interested if Shadow Erdtree takes it the level it sort of hit. Whether it will obviously drop down a bit. Whether it will maintain, I don't know. Well, we'll see. It's done well.
Couple of figures from Sega's results. Sega reported, or Sega Sammy, so the overall parent company that is Sega video games, but also like amusements and pachinko and Pachislot and all the other things, their new casino gaming business that they're trying to get into. Net sales for this were down 3.2% year on year to $710.5 million. However, entertainment content, which encompasses video games, toys, and animation, that was up 34% to $493.3 million. A large part of that is because they had really solid performance for full game sales, so not just back catalogue and DLC and stuff, but like full game sales were up 40% year on year to $102.5 million. That's primarily back catalogue, but there were some good new releases. The big one was Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance sold 500,000 units during the period, which accounts like, given that they sold 710,000 new releases, during the period, like the vast majority of its new release sales were just that one title. The reason I brought this one up is because while figures were a little confusing, like the upshot was that their profits increased. Part of the reason their profits increased is because of the inclusion of Rovio. Sega obviously bought the Angry Birds developer last year. The deal completed back in August. And I thought it was kind of an interesting follow-on, given that we spent a lot of time talking about Microsoft's results last year. Like, Microsoft's not the only one kind of benefiting from an acquisition. Sega's results are going to be bolstered this year because they've now got this successful free-to-play business, bringing in like kind of extra mobile revenue and so forth. Mm. So it's just good to see that boost in effect.
Yeah, you get a bit of that. Yeah. And Sega's had a brutal year, particularly their studios business. I mean, Atlas has done very well, but when you look at what's happened at Sega Hardlight in Europe, you look at Sega Hardlight, you look at Creative Assembly. They've sold off Relic, obviously. They've been taking the axe over some of their projects. Obviously, Hyena's never launched, so it's been a difficult time for Sega. But I think a lot of the financials you're going to see things sort of being okay-ish. I think that's when everyone asks me how was Sony's financials, how was Take-Two's financials, I said okay-ish, and I think we're sort of, which is best I think we can hope for. And yeah, Rovio's made Sega look really good, and they've had a hit launch. But they've also cut a load of costs and stuff like that. I'm just disappointed Super Monkey Ball isn't being cited as one of their breakout hits. I love that game.
Last quickfire one I want to do before we dive deeper into kind of some larger financial results was Remedy. Remedy released their financial results recently for Q2, calendar Q2. Revenues were up 16.2% year on year to 10.3 million euros. Operating loss was 3.2 million euros compared to an operating loss of 4.8 million euros for the same quarter. So the loss has improved, the loss is smaller. For the first half of the year so far, revenues are up 33.7% to 21.1 million euros. Operating loss was 5.3 million euros compared to an operating loss of 10.4 million euros in the first half of 2023. So they've halved their loss there. The two interesting things came from this. Obviously, revenues are up. But the company actually said the main source of revenue was development fees for ongoing work on the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, which is, as much as they're being developed by Remedy, they're being financed by Rockstar. And then, of course, you've got additional royalties from Control and Alan Wake Remastered, which are still selling away in the background. The other interesting tidbit was that Alan Wake 2, it's not reaching the stage yet where it's generating royalties, but it has at least recouped most of its development and marketing expenses since it was released in October.
Yeah, I think Remedy would have expected more from that, and I think Epic would have done as well. Look, the game is a really fantastic, incredible, generation-defining quality game, and I think it will sell well over years and years and years. They've got the physical release coming out in October, so I think it will do all right for them in the long run. And Remedy are always very careful in terms of very prudent in terms of how they spend money. So I'm not particularly worried about them, but I think they would have expected Alan Wake 2 to have recouped quite faster than this, and they would be starting to see some upside in their results. I think you don't launch a major game and then deliver a loss in the following quarters. But they've still got a lot of work to do. Remedy, they've recently reacquired the Control IP earlier in the year. Are they going to be self-publishing that now? Are they looking for new partners? I'd be interested to see what's going on with them. But obviously they've got a lot of stuff going on. They've got a lot of projects, and Max Payne being one of them. But Alan Wake 2 is a phenomenal game, and I just hope it keeps trickling along and keeps finding new players, and that we'll be hearing about Alan Wake 2 contributing to their bottom line for the next 5 years, hopefully.
Alan Wake 2 is one of those games I equate to something like, the example I always go with is something like Mirror's Edge Catalyst, where the original game had a proper cult following, critically well received, commercially didn't set the world on fire, not enough to kind of warrant a sequel. That was certainly the case with Alan Wake. And then you have this pent-up demand for a sequel that lasts years and years and years. And then when the sequel comes out, or the reboot, or whatever they do to revitalize the IP, and it doesn't quite take off, and the IP goes on hold again, I'm hoping that's not going to be the fate for.
Yeah, I think you're talking Remedy. Remedy aren't EA. Remedy doesn't need to deliver. Doesn't need to deliver those. EA's targets and ambitions are a different scale, and Remedy's obviously a great. But at the same time, they've got lots of other projects on the go, so I think it might be a while before we see Alan Wake come back anyway. But and it's still DLC to come, I think. So it's been I'd say the physical release. Love the game. Hope it keeps doing well.
Okay, let's dive into some larger financials for some kind of the top end companies in terms of scale. We're going to start with Sony. Sony's
financials, James. There's a lot of numbers. I normally love this, but even I'm going.
I know. I won't rattle off.
So what was the non-GAAP results, James? That's what I want to know.
I won't roll off too many numbers. Sales and net income are up overall at Sony, so that's encompassing all their business. If we're looking specifically at game and network services sales, those were up 12% year on year to 5.89 billion. A couple of things that people pulled out was the big one was PlayStation 5 shifted 2.4 million units during the quarter, compared to 3.3 million during the same quarter last year. So 27% fewer units of the PlayStation 5 were sold in Q2. Yeah. I believe I also saw that means that the PlayStation actually missed its targets, its original hardware targets it set. This, again, kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week in terms of hardware sales decline at this stage of the console generation. With Microsoft, it's different because, as you said last week, Chris, it's not a priority for them is to sell that hardware. But
Xbox is Xbox peaked in its second year. PlayStation's got a challenge of trying to convert PS4 users, and PS4 users this is what it looks like to me. PS4 users are going, why do I need to upgrade? I've got Fortnite, I've got Warzone, I've got Roblox. Why do I need a PS5? And the answers that they're being given at the moment are a DLC for Elden Ring, and that's about it. So there's not enough reason to upgrade at the moment, and I think that's a challenge for PlayStation. If you look at the UK numbers, like this is UK, PlayStation 5 has passed 4 million copies in the UK. It's only the 9th console to hit 4 million units in the UK. It's the 5th fastest selling console. But here's the thing. When PS5 hit 1 million, it hit it in 39 weeks in the UK. That matches the previous record, which was the Wii. Right, so it's the joint fastest selling console in history, PS5 was initially. When it got to 2 million, when it got to 3 million, it dropped down to number 4 behind the Wii, the PS2 and the PS4. And now it's below the PS1. It's now the 5th fastest selling console. We are seeing momentum drop on PS5 in the UK's not the big, UK's not going to, it's not the huge, it's only 4 million out of the 60 odd million they've sold, but it is a popular market for them. And I think it just speaks to the fact that this generation sort of hasn't got going, and the last generation, there's not been a huge amount of incentive to upgrade. It will come, and I suppose we'll talk about Take-Two's financials. Strauss Zelnick, I brought this up with Strauss Zelnick in an interview we did last week, and he said that, it will happen. People will upgrade. It's just clearly happening a little bit later. And I don't know what that means for the console cycle. Right? If people are upgrading onto their PS5s in their year 4, 5, and 6, when do you launch PS6? Yeah. But anyway,
that is a wonder, because obviously, it does feel in many ways that this console generation is still just getting started in terms of growing those install bases, having those kind of must-have next-gen titles that aren't available on the previous gen. Rob mentioned some of this in his column. Like he wrote a column about how Sony's results overall, like yes, the hardware sales are down, but overall the results are solid, and they show how well Sony's handling this generation so far, how it's diversifying its business. He mentioned a couple of factors, as you alluded to, one of the reasons people are going to upgrade is when GTA 6 launches next year. But the other is, we're still expecting a PlayStation 5 Pro, which, has, the details have been leaked. It's not been formally announced, but there's the expectation that a mid-gen refresh is coming. We don't know if it's going to be this year, it might be next year. But going back to your point of what does it mean for the overall hardware cycle? Mid-gen refreshes, for example, that's only really been a thing in the previous generation with the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, and that was purely because there was a significant step forward in TV technology that wasn't available at launch, i.e. 4K screens readily available at home. There isn't that same jump this year, so there isn't the need for a mid-gen. But it's strange how that one instance where there was a mid-gen refresh with a significant, or at least a notable update in hardware, leads people to expect there to be one here. But if the base PlayStation 5 is still kind of falling behind momentum, I can't imagine most people are holding out for a PS5 Pro.
No, I don't think the Pro's going to change things, but it might extend the life cycle. I think you look at two of the biggest games that are coming out on PS5 this Christmas. One is Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is only on new generation hardware, right? So if you're a big fan of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if you're a big fan of Assassin's Creed, and there's a lot of people out there, the last Assassin's Creed did over $1 billion, then you have to upgrade to get the new PlayStation, and there'll be people that do that. But the Call of Duty is the other one, Black Ops 6. That's still on the previous generation machines. We're on the 4th anniversary this November we are seeing a very slow move from one generation to the other. And if you're wondering, do you still have a 7-year cycle? I mean, I know that was the plan. They still fingered a 7-year cycle. Or do you just sort of iterate on this hardware a few times this time around? And just, because I don't know. Are we going to get a Naughty Dog this generation? Hell, we might get Ken Levine. Looks like he's going to crop up at some point this generation. He skipped the last one. It's getting a bit crazy. When it was Mark Cerny, and I interviewed with Mark Cerny in June, where he said that we're getting to the point where game development cycles are longer than console generations, and that's well, something's going to have to change, right? I think both. I think console development cycles need to go down.
Yeah, I agree. Development cycles are absurd at this point. I mean, the fact that GTA 6, I know they made Red Dead Redemption in between. Red Dead Redemption 2 was made in between, but still that was led by a slightly different studio. The fact that GTA 6 came out 11 years ago.
GTA 5, yeah. And,
GTA 5, sorry. GTA 5 came out 11 years ago, and 12 years later.
For me, the biggest one is that Ken Levine closed down Irrational Games is it Irrational Games? I think in 2015 to set up a new studio so he could make games faster, and it's still not here. And that's just we're picking on Take-Two a bit there. I feel. Shall we? Is it a segue? Is that a segue?
It's a great segue, and it's a great segue. So, around Take-Two's results, you spoke to Strauss Zelnick. We usually have a quarterly catch up with Strauss, which is absolutely brilliant. Like, how did the conversation go?
Yeah, it was quick for a couple of questions, and there was lots of things we could talk about, but it was boring financials. Like it was a little bit lower than I thought maybe it would have been. Maybe, I don't know. Seemed all right. Take-Two in a bit of an odd spot. NBA didn't do as well as previous NBAs have done. It was tracking about 2 million units behind, and GTA Online was a bit down, but they did a couple of hit mobile games from Zynga. They talked about Top Spin, but didn't seem to do anything to their numbers. They mentioned Star Wars Hunters, but that's not really contributing much yet either. So it was okay financials. It's where they said they'd be, but obviously people aren't interested in that. They're interested in what's coming next. They're interested in Grand Theft Auto 6, and they're not telling us anything apart from it is still coming out in 2025, which. It's good. There was a couple of bits. There was a couple of stories that went around. One was around whether or not they'd make a FIFA game, which he talked about all the reasons why they wouldn't. That doesn't mean they didn't say he wasn't going to, but it was it addressed all the reasons why they wouldn't. And then there was talk around. One of the things I asked him about was Game Pass, right? Because he's got Strauss and Take-Two have strong views on, not even strong views. I think it reflects a lot of the AAA industry where when it comes to putting games day and date in subscription, their sort of games, their AAA high-end games, it doesn't make business sense for them. They don't think it will. They believe in it from a legacy game perspective. They don't really believe it in an old thing. But I wondered if maybe that opinion might change, if consumer habits change, if Call of Duty, Black Ops 6 going into Game Pass day one was going to cause a shift. So I asked him, and he gave a beautiful quote, which goes, "No, doesn't change our opinions because it doesn't change our decisions because our decisions are rational," which was a tasty little comment, which obviously fans online have not taken to greatly. But yeah, it was Take-Two are doing okay. I think they've got Civilization 7 in at the start of next year. They've narrowed that down, so that's in their financial year. They've got something like 24 games over the next 2 financial years, including 15 what they call immersive games. That includes 6 sports titles. So those 15 immersive games, that'll include GTA 6. There's also 3 remasters. I guess Max Payne might be one of those as well. So they've got a bunch of stuff coming out. They feel pretty confident. They use the term most robust and strongest lineup in our history. They've said that. They've been saying that pretty much every financial results for the last 5 years. But I believe them. It looks, it's just that, like a lot of the financials at the moment, there isn't too much to say, even though we've managed to drag a whole podcast out on it. There's not a lot of games out, and we're all looking ahead.
Yeah, it's all coming down to kind of those future lineups. Like, the most, it's genuinely exciting to hear, 24 titles in the next 2 years, 15 immersive titles. Like Gearbox has been talking recently around the release of the Borderlands movie that they're working on the next Borderlands, so that another one of those is coming out, and like everyone is looking forward as to like the big releases over the next few years, which kind of help shift units and potentially shift consoles. So it's good to see them doing okay. Like we are in a kind of a holding pattern with Take-Two, and I kind of feel sorry for everything else that's being made at Take-Two, because like all eyes are on GTA 6, and I'm looking for the thing is Take-Two is they've got these mega games like NBA and like GTA and Red Dead and the Rockstar titles generally, but they do have this sort of depth to them every now and again. It just feels like it felt like the last generation, the PS4 generation. Take-Two was very absent. They felt like they had a lot of live service stuff that did very well for them, but we didn't see. We didn't get BioShock. We think we got one Borderlands. It was just a lot. I mean, it was for most publishers, but it just felt like a very quiet one, particularly from the 2K label.
I
think that's
a little bit about was Private Division, which was their basically they've got 2 independent games this financial year. One of those is that Hobbit game, that Tales from the Shire game. Then they've got 1 independent game for the next 2 years. So I think that is probably the end of Private Division, which that's what's been widely reported, and I think it's a safe assumption. But it was Take-Two moving out of the independent game. It's a part of realigning their focus on games that will deliver the most for them. Blah blah blah. But
which kind of makes sense. Like it's gutting it's heartbreaking for the developers who actually were either signed up to Private Division. I mean they're developers who are signed up to Private Division, like their agreements are in place and they're going to continue. But like anyone who was hoping to sign with Private Division, like that's another independent. But the market's not short of the indie publishers.
Yeah, and there'd be people who would have just been signed and who maybe been dropped since. Or
absolutely, yeah, and it's heartbreaking for them. But
Game Freak had a game with them. I don't know if that's the title they've got left. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a Take-Two, they've gone through 3 rounds of cuts. They think they've got the team in place now. I mean, they're going to say this, but they did. They said this, that they feel they've got the right size business and they've had to bring out their costs. They talk about efficiency. It's all very corporate. But yeah, Take-Two doing all right. Obviously, they've gone through 3 rounds of cuts. Zynga Games did quite well for them. Everything else is sort of a bit, as it was.
That was encouraging. Strauss's comment about that they are now the right size. Like it's kind of like you say, like
3 rounds of redundancies to get
after. No, 3 rounds of job cuts and then 1 round of redundancies, but a pretty hefty one. I think it was like 800, 900 staff, wasn't it?
Yeah. And also these cuts. A lot of those cuts were related to Zynga. And the move. There were roles that were across. They didn't need. But yeah.
Last story I wanted to discuss is not a financial story. Everybody rejoice. And even better, it's kind of an optimistic, it's a good news story.
It's good news.
It's good news. We like good news. We could do with more of this. So we woke up to this. I say we woke up. Chris went to sleep with this last night. Krafton, the publisher best known for PUBG, so PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, has acquired Tango Gameworks and the Hi-Fi Rush IP from Xbox as part of a strategic agreement. The 2 companies are working together on a smooth transition. The Tango team is going to continue working on things, including further developments of the Hi-Fi Rush IP. So on the off chance that no one's been following the news, obviously Tango Gameworks was announced for closure back in May, one of 4 ZeniMax-owned studios that Microsoft was going to close. Hi-Fi Rush came out last year. I think it was Shadow Drop last year. Very acclaimed title, award-winning, and it was kind of baffled belief. It begged belief that like this studio would be closed by Microsoft. So it's wonderful to see this studio getting a second chance and continuing as it was. Like we desperately need more of this. After the last 2.5 years, or 2 or so years that we've had in the industry, we need more studios to be rescued.
Yeah, I've said before. I understood why. I understand the studios that are closing. Or the projects that are being cancelled, by and large, and I hear them, I'm sad about it, but I understand. Right? I'm like, I get it. Tango Gameworks, it's not that I didn't understand, I just felt it was a real shame. When Microsoft, back in 2019, or whenever it was, I spoke to Phil Spencer, it was around, they made a bunch of acquisitions. This is before Bethesda, before Activision. We asked, what are you interested in buying? And at the time, Microsoft were looking at areas in which they were not strong. So they were thinking about PC games. They were thinking about maybe family games, but they were also thinking about games for the Japanese audience. There was markets they could push Game Pass, they could succeed in. And then they bought Bethesda. And Bethesda make exactly the sort of games that Microsoft makes, which is shooters and RPGs. Right? That's their big titles. And when they bought Activision Blizzard, sure, again, there's shooters in there and there's platform games in there. Microsoft have a bunch of platform games. But at least when they bought Activision Blizzard, they got mobile, they got PC. I just thought Bethesda was an unusual buy, and it was clearly an opportunistic one. They didn't want to pass that by. They just bought Obsidian that were making a Fallout-style game. I just was a bit like... It didn't feel like they needed it, but it obviously fit with their thing. The one thing that they bought within that organisation that they weren't already strong with was a Japanese studio. And that Japanese studio made a very Japanese-oriented game in Hi-Fi Rush. It was critically acclaimed. It was released on a platform initially that people in Japan don't own. And look, it probably didn't make any money, but it was really good. And if I was Microsoft, if I was any company, I'd be like, this is good. We've got something here. We've got a good game. We've got it's different to the sort of games that we make generally. It's got a wonderful flavour to it. It's got a small audience. Let's go really big on a sequel. Let's market it hard. Let's put it on as many platforms as possible. Let's even get it on mobile, on Switch, and let's really go big on the Hi-Fi Rush opportunity. There's something. We've got something here. But clearly, they decided, no, we don't. It's too. There's no patience for that. And when you've got all these big mega $1 billion, but I thought it was such a shame. There was clearly something there. And so it's good news that Krafton have come in and gone, you know what, we actually can work with this. There's something here we can work on. The question I've got is, like, Tango Gameworks closed its doors a month ago. It wasn't that it was closing down. It closed down. So there's an element of trying to, reconnect with that team and try and build it back up again. But yeah, it's good that the Hi-Fi Rush series is going to continue. It's good that I hope Krafton also published the Callisto Protocol. I hope they have slightly more realistic expectations for this one than they did for that one. Yeah, it's great news. It's wonderful news, and it was definitely worth staying up till 1 a.m. in the morning to write that one up.
That is, mercifully, all the news we have for now. But before we go, we are introducing a new segment called What Do the Numbers Mean?
What do the numbers mean? It's nothing like old Black Ops reference.
Absolutely not. And eventually we'll have some sort of really kind of professional sting or maybe a sound bite of that to segue in. But essentially, each week, this is where it's going to be where I indulge Chris in his obsession with data and figures and retail numbers, and we allow him to just unleash. So, Chris, this week, what do the numbers mean?
Ooh, I like that. Well, very good. And you did that off the cuff as well. You didn't even write it. Well done. So this week we've got the July market data's out, which is typically the most boring market data that you can get. They're not very rarely big games come out. Don't normally see big numbers. But there's a couple of stats that I wanted. Actually, I'm going to talk about two things. One was the reveal from both Sakana and GFK in the UK that reveals that PlayStation Portal is one of the highest revenue generated accessories launched this year. Now, it's not the best selling accessory. It's not a DualSense controller. It's not an Xbox controller, but it's done really well, this accessory. And every now and again people mention it's done really well, this, but I think it actually speaks to a larger trend. And I actually think the success of this Portal really, Nintendo first, when they did the Switch back in 2017, they caught on to something with this idea of a home console you could take on the go. Xbox clearly excited about it. They're talking about doing their own handheld. Steam, even Valve tapped into this with Steam Deck. This opportunity to keep people playing outside of the home or in different areas of the home or around their lives. Debbie Bestwick at Team 17 once described the Switch as a lifestyle device, and I really love that term because it really does sum up what I think is cool about this. And PlayStation Portal is in that area. It's not the same thing. It's not a dedicated handheld, but it speaks to that same trend. And I do believe this is an opportunity for the console industry and the PC games industry for two reasons. I think there are those people who lapse out of these games. Who get old, they get older. Old as I do. They get older, and you've got things like they've got kids and they've got work and they don't get to play games anymore, and maybe they don't upgrade to the next console, and maybe they lapse out. I honestly think these sort of devices are a great way of keeping people playing games in between it. I also think it gets people playing more games. And I don't just mean like, it means people can play Fortnite for longer, but they potentially able to play different things. And I think that's really exciting. There's not much to say about those numbers exactly, other than I think that's interesting. But the thing I really wanted to talk about was EA Sports FC 24. Now, the reason I want to talk about it was number one in Europe and number one in the UK during July. That's not a surprise. The European Championships were running during July, and England got into the final. So it did particularly well in the UK, over 40% up over previous year's football game, FIFA 23, in the same month. But what I thought it's worth, we're getting to the end now of EA Sports FC first year. And I thought it's worth looking at how well has this game done, right? How well Have EA just been able to continue the success that they built with FIFA? Has the loss of the FIFA brand damaged it or harmed it in any way? And these are the figures. So if you EA Sports FC 24, up until the end of July, sales are down 2.1% on FIFA 23. Now, FIFA 23 was a real hit. There was also, it came out when there was a World Cup at Christmas, and which is quite a significant thing. It's not something that happens. Normally World Cups and European Championships are in the summer. And it was last FIFA game. So it did very, very well, did FIFA 23. And EA Sports FC 24 is only slightly off it. This is in the UK. In Europe, it's 4.4% off FIFA 23, so a little bit more. If you compare it to FIFA 22, now I think FIFA 22 is a better comparison because 2022 is also when there was a European Championship. Also, England got into the final of that championship. EA Sports FC 24 is up. This is GSD numbers I'm quoting here. Is up 4% on FIFA 22, and for the UK and across Europe, it's up 3.5% on FIFA 22. Now, that actually means, as far as I'm concerned, EA has just continued the success of FIFA. They've not been able to grow on FIFA 23 yet, but I think this is a real win for them. They've been quite aggressive with it. They've been doing some clever promotions around Black Friday. They've really pushed the new version on Switch. They've been quite aggressive in trying to establish it, and I think that's important. If EA is going to do another, if there is going to be another FIFA game, so if the FIFA, the Federation of International Football Associations, if they decide to find a new license partner and Take-Two sort of poured cold water on the idea that would be them. But if that is going to happen with EA, with FIFA, I think the most likely we'll see a new FIFA game is in the 25-26 sports window. That's when a World Cup is, and FIFA World Cup, FIFA owned the license to World Cup, so any game that comes out in the FIFA 25-26, so the football season, 2025-2026 football season, is likely to get, if there's going to be a new FIFA launch, it will be then, and EA will want to make sure they are fully entrenched and the market's theirs and no one can be able to wrestle it from them by then. And EA Sports FC 24, I would say, has done that right away. That's before, and now I've got another year to try and cement that position. So yeah, I think it's been a good success, EA Sports 24. There's still a couple of months to go, but one football season has ended, another one is starting. So I don't expect a huge shift in numbers now, but it's been a good result for EA and FIFA. So that's, James, what the numbers mean this week.
Thank you very much for filling me in. And I'm so intrigued to see how this goes going forward. Like, I remember when EA and FIFA split their partnership, originally, I remember thinking back then, whoever gets the FIFA license afterwards have got such a challenge ahead of them, because it's not just the license that sells that game. It is the decades of, I don't play football games, but I know how well EA has honed its expertise and the quality of its games. FIFA was, to an extent, the name on the box, particularly since they've managed to secure so many licenses afterwards for EA Sports FC. Well,
FIFA doesn't give you anything outside of the brand name FIFA and the World Cup. And Strauss talked about this in his interview with IGN at Take-Two. You do a deal with any other football association, you get an awful lot of rights with that. You get the leagues and all that kind of stuff. You don't with FIFA. You don't get the Premier League. You don't get the Bundesliga. You don't get Manchester United or Barcelona or Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. You don't get any of those names and rights. You have to go and do them individually. It's a painstakingly difficult licensing process, which EA has been doing for decades. And so if you're going to go into that space, if you want to really compete with EA, your FIFA license gives you a bit of brand recognition, great, but then you have to go around to all of these clubs and leagues and sign these deals, and it is going to be a huge, huge, huge task. The only company I can see that could do it at this level is Take-Two, right? Is some, because they are a sports company, and they might be tempted to go up against. They don't really have a European sport. Really, a lot of their sports are US centric, so they might feel this as an opportunity, but they also might think that this is a hugely the indication from Strauss is that yes, this is just, they're going to have to spend a lot of money, a lot of time to try and potentially unsettle EA, and EA has immediately managed to continue FIFA's success into EA Sports FC 24. So But EA has bigger ambitions than this. It isn't just to match what they did with FIFA. They want to turn EA Sports into a football platform, which means all sorts of different things. You have to read the interviews with them to really understand what they mean by that. But they have far bigger ambitions, which they weren't able to do with FIFA because it was ultimately the license that belonged to someone else. So. It's interesting. But if they've got off to a really great start, I would have expected a steeper drop. And I know there's been some strong discounting of EA Sports FC 24. And not everyone's loved this iteration of the game. I think it's done okay. But they've put themselves in a strong position. And if they wanted to do something that puts off potential competitors, I think they've probably done it. I wouldn't be surprised if the World Cup game we get in 2026 is the Mario and Sonic at the World Cup 2026.
Well, after the Olympics have dropped them, I'd like to see Mario and Sonic get back. So yeah, okay. I think we're going to wrap up there due to a combination of too many financial stories and far too many technical glitches at the back end here. We genuinely have no idea how long we've been going. This is almost certainly the longest microcast we have ever produced. But if you're even hearing this, it's a fucking miracle. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be back next week, but things are going to be a little bit different. We are going to be in Cologne for Gamescom and DevCom, aren't we, Chris?
Well, I'll be in for Gamescom.
You'll be in for Gamescom. You're joining me after the very tail end of DevCom. You'll be vaguely in Cologne by then. We are hoping to do something a little bit different with podcasts next week, rather than a news-centric story. We'll obviously be talking about the news and everything that's coming out of Cologne, but we are hoping to get some guests on. We're still kind of working on this at the time. So next week, very kind of keep your eyes peeled on your podcasting platform of choice. You may well see more than one GI Microcast out next week. If you want to listen to that, make sure you subscribe. We're the GamesIndustry.biz podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice. This is often available via YouTube, although we're transitioning to a kind of a different video format, so some episodes may not be there. We'll work that out as we go forward. But yes, we will be back in some form next week during Gamescom. In the meantime, thank you so much for sticking with us, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.